My friend's mom invited me to stay the night, with one simple warning: don't tell anyone. What happened next changed everything. The evening had settled into a quiet rhythm, the kind that makes a house feel both empty and alive. I was at my friend's house, lounging on the worn couch in the living room while he rushed out for a last-minute errand. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the kitchen clock filled the spaces between our conversation, now paused. That's when she appeared, his mom. She moved with a natural grace that was effortless yet commanding, the kind of presence that made you instinctively take note. She was in her early 40s, confident, but there was a quiet vulnerability in the way her eyes lingered on things, as if she was both observing the world and shielding herself from it. She smiled at me, a small, knowing curve of her lips, and asked if I was comfortable, her voice warm but layered with an unspoken playfulness. I felt my heart skip a beat, not from fear exactly, but from awareness. She had that rare ability to make ordinary interactions feel weighted, significant. As she moved past me to the kitchen, her perfume lingered, a subtle blend of vanilla and something woodsy, comforting yet intoxicating. I caught the faint brush of her hand against my shoulder as she reached past me for a glass, and I realized just how aware I had become of every small movement she made. I tried to keep my composure, pretending I was relaxed, even though my chest had tightened slightly. She noticed, of course, because she always notices. There was an ease in the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a casual gesture that made her seem both approachable and untouchable at once. And then, without warning, she offered me something I hadn't anticipated, an invitation. "You can stay the night," she said, her tone light, almost teasing, "if you promise not to tell." The words hung in the air between us, playful yet charged with an energy I couldn't ignore. My mind raced. Social norms, ethics, the absurdity of the situation. But beneath it all, there was a flicker of curiosity, a pull I couldn't quite name. It wasn't just the invitation itself. It was the way she said it. The slight tilt of her head, the warmth in her eyes, the subtle softness in her voice. All of it suggested that this was more than a casual offer. And yet, there was no pressure, no overt suggestion of anything inappropriate. Just a moment suspended in time, loaded with possibility and unspoken tension. I agreed, my voice steady despite the quickening of my heartbeat. The house suddenly felt smaller, cozier, almost intimate. I went to settle into the guest room, aware of her presence in the background, sensing her watching in small, indirect ways. And for the first time that evening, I realized that this night would be unlike any other. The ordinary had shifted, and I was acutely conscious of the thrill of the unknown, the magnetic pull of someone older, wiser, and undeniably compelling. Settling into the guest room, I felt a mixture of awkwardness and anticipation. The room was small but welcoming, the kind that made you feel both like a guest and like you could stay for longer than just a night. A soft lamplight painted the walls in warm hues, and the faint scent of lavender from a small diffuser added a calm rhythm to the space. Every ordinary object, the neatly folded blankets, the worn wooden dresser, even the small stack of books by the bed, suddenly felt charged, as if they were all part of this quiet, delicate dance we hadn't named yet. I had barely begun to unwind when she appeared again, carrying a tray with a glass of water and a few snacks. Her presence filled the room instantly, not in a loud or intrusive way, but in that rare way some people do, effortlessly, naturally. "Thought you might be hungry," she said softly, setting the tray down beside me. Her fingers brushed mine for the briefest moment as she handed me a plate, a touch so light it could have been accidental, but I felt it anyway, warm, steady, and oddly comforting. We talked while I nibbled on the snacks. The conversation was casual, yet everything about her drew me in. The subtle way she listened, the slight tilt of her head when she was considering what I said, the tiny smiles that appeared without her noticing. I found myself noticing the details I usually overlooked. Her elegant posture as she leaned against the counter, the way her hair caught the lamplight and shimmered slightly, and the softness in her voice when she laughed at something trivial I said. It wasn't flirtation exactly, but it had a magnetic pull, a slow, simmering energy that made me acutely aware of her presence. As the evening stretched on, our proximity created a tension I couldn't ignore. When she reached past me to adjust a cushion, her hand brushed the back of mine. I froze for a moment, the warmth of her touch lingering longer than necessary. When she caught my gaze, there was a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or the hint of amusement. My heart beat faster, and I realized I was entirely conscious of every movement, every gesture, every subtle shift in the air between us. Even the smallest routines took on weight. She poured a cup of tea and handed it to me, her fingers brushing mine again, brief and fleeting. We laughed softly at nothing in particular, yet the laughter felt intimate, almost conspiratorial, like sharing a secret that belonged only to the two of us. I was drawn to her confidence and grace, yet also to the vulnerability I sensed beneath her poised exterior. By the time she excused herself to her room, I was left sitting there, acutely aware of the empty space she left behind and the subtle energy that had shifted the room. I realized that staying the night wasn't just about sleeping under the same roof. It was about sharing space with someone whose presence could make the ordinary feel electric. And as I lay in the quiet of the guest room, I couldn't stop replaying every glance, every brush of her hand, every unspoken word between us. It was the kind of tension that didn't need words, the kind that quietly pulled you toward someone in ways that made every simple gesture feel like a revelation. After the initial flutter of nervous excitement faded, our interactions settled into something quieter, more nuanced. We found ourselves lingering in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting warm pools of light across the floor. I noticed the subtle details I hadn't before. The gentle curve of her smile when she caught me looking, the slight arch of her brow when she was curious, and the way her presence seemed to soften the edges of the room itself. Our conversation drifted naturally, touching on everything from favorite books and movies to the more delicate subjects of life's disappointments and fleeting joys. She spoke with a calm assurance, but there were moments where her voice softened, revealing glimpses of vulnerability she rarely let anyone see. She shared little anecdotes, quiet struggles, moments of solitude, and I listened, captivated not only by her words but by the way she said them. Each pause, each laugh, each sigh felt intentional, like she was letting me in without saying it outright. I found myself leaning in, not out of necessity, but out of an instinctive desire to be closer, to share the space with her in a way that felt intimate without needing to be spoken. Our knees occasionally brushed as we shifted on the couch, subtle contact that sent small jolts of awareness through me. When she handed me a cup of tea, our fingers met for a fraction longer than necessary, and I noticed the gentle warmth of her hand against mine. It wasn't flirtation, it was connection, delicate and meaningful, a language of small gestures that spoke louder than words. She laughed softly at one of my jokes, and I realized how deeply attuned I had become to her presence. The sound of her laughter was rich and full, filling the quiet spaces of the house, and somehow making me feel like the room existed just for the two of us. And yet, there was always restraint, a careful balance between closeness and propriety that made the tension simmer rather than boil. As the night deepened, our topics grew slightly more personal. She asked about my dreams, my fears, the things I'd never said aloud. I answered honestly, feeling the rare comfort of being truly listened to. In turn, she revealed moments of her own hesitation and longing, snippets of experiences that hinted at emotional depth I hadn't expected. Every story, every reflection, every shared laugh made me feel as if we were creating a quiet bond that neither time nor circumstance could easily touch. Even in silence, her presence was magnetic. The faint scent of her perfume lingered in the air, wrapping around me like a gentle embrace. The way she settled back on the couch, her posture relaxed but her gaze attentive, made me acutely aware of the space between us. And yet, how that space could shrink with a single glance, a brief touch, or the tilt of her head. By the end of the evening, I understood something fundamental. This wasn't just a night at my friend's house. It was an initiation into a subtle, slow-burning connection, a quiet tension threaded through conversation, shared spaces, and the unspoken understanding that had begun to grow between us. And as I prepared for the night, I carried with me a heightened awareness of her presence, a sense of anticipation for the moments that were yet to come. By the time the clock nudged past 10, the house had slipped into a comfortable hush. Outside, the wind rustled gently against the trees, and the faint hum of distant traffic barely penetrated the quiet warmth inside. I had just settled back onto the couch, nursing a mug of tea, when she appeared again, this time carrying a small throw blanket. "You looked a little cold," she said softly, draping it over my shoulders. Her fingers lingered for just a fraction of a second longer than necessary, and the warmth from her touch sent an unexpected thrill through me. It was a simple gesture, almost mundane in its intent, but in that moment it felt profound. Her touch was deliberate yet natural, comforting without overwhelming, as if she instinctively knew the line between closeness and propriety. I felt a strange blend of emotions, gratitude, awareness, and an odd, quiet longing. She smiled, a small, almost secretive smile that hinted at something unsaid, something shared between us that had no need for words. I realized then how attuned I had become to her presence. The subtle rise and fall of her chest as she breathed, the delicate shift of her weight as she stood nearby, even the faint scent of her perfume, which seemed to settle around me like a gentle embrace. We sat together in silence for a while, the tea warm in my hands, her presence beside me both grounding and electrifying. When she shifted closer to pass me the sugar, our knees brushed lightly, and my breath caught just enough for her to notice. She looked at me then, her gaze lingering, not probing, not demanding, simply observing. In her eyes, I saw a flicker of recognition, an unspoken understanding of the tension that had begun to thread itself between us. It was in these small moments that the connection deepened. The casual gesture of draping a blanket became a bridge between two worlds. Her world, poised and confident, and mine, tentative but fully awake to the subtle pull she exerted. There was no rush, no expectation, only the gentle acknowledgement that our interactions had shifted. Each smile, each glance, each accidental brush of hands carried a quiet significance that neither of us needed to explain. I became aware of the rhythm of our shared space, the unspoken language forming in gestures and silences. Her voice, soft and melodic, filled the room when she asked about my day, and I noticed how it calmed me, made me feel seen. Her laughter, light and genuine, had begun to wrap around me like a cocoon of warmth and security. And yet, beneath the comfort was a simmering tension, a magnetic awareness of boundaries, desire, and restraint. As the night wore on, I realized something essential. It was not a grand declaration or a dramatic gesture that connected us, but the quiet, deliberate ways we acknowledged one another. A hand on the shoulder, a blanket draped with care, a gaze that lingered a heartbeat too long. These small acts carried more weight than any words could. And in that quiet intimacy, I felt this subtle shift of something deeper beginning to bloom, fragile yet undeniable between us. The night had grown quieter, the kind of silence that makes even the faintest sound feel significant. I found myself sitting on the edge of the couch, replaying the evening in my mind. The warmth of her hand on my shoulder, the way her smile had lingered just a beat too long, the soft cadence of her voice as she asked about my day. Each memory carried a weight I hadn't expected, stirring a mix of excitement, confusion, and an uneasy awareness of the boundaries I was towing. It was impossible not to notice the subtle shifts in her demeanor as well. When she moved around the room, there was a gentle hesitation in her gestures, a kind of careful attention that suggested she, too, was aware of the tension simmering between us. She would brush past me with a light touch that seemed accidental, then quickly pulled back as if realizing the electricity it carried. Her laughter occasionally faltered, just slightly, when our eyes met, and I could sense the unspoken question lingering in the air. Where did we stand in this quiet intimacy? I struggled with my own feelings. There was admiration, certainly, for her poise and confidence, but there was more than that. There was a pull I couldn't quite name, a fascination that went beyond curiosity. I found myself analyzing every glance, every gesture, wondering if she felt the same subtle longing I did. And yet, the social rules, the unspoken ethics of the situation made me hesitate. Was it appropriate to feel this way? Was it wrong to notice the magnetic energy that existed between us? My mind and heart were at odds, each moment of closeness sparking excitement and doubt in equal measure. Even ordinary actions became charged with significance. When she handed me another cup of tea, our fingers met briefly, a touch that was both innocent and intimate. When she shifted on the couch, our knees brushed, and the small jolt of contact sent a ripple of awareness through me. Each accidental, or perhaps intentional, gesture was magnified, the air between us thick with unspoken questions. I realized that part of the tension came from the space between words. We spoke freely about life, about dreams, about trivial things, yet there were conversations we didn't have, truths we didn't voice. That restraint only heightened the emotional pull, creating a quiet, simmering connection that was both thrilling and unnerving. I was acutely aware of her presence, the subtle warmth she radiated, the lingering scent of her perfume, the soft sound of her breath as she shifted closer on the couch. Every small detail seemed designed to awaken an awareness I couldn't ignore. By the end of the evening, I understood that we were both navigating a delicate balance. Closeness without overstepping, desire without crossing boundaries, curiosity without arrogance. The tension had intensified, but so had the respect and understanding between us. I knew that what had begun as a simple, unexpected invitation had evolved into something far more intricate, a slow, simmering connection that demanded patience, mindfulness, and, above all, emotional honesty. The house had grown quieter still, the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock filling the spaces between us. I found myself in the living room again, the faint golden glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the floor. She was there, sitting on the couch with a mug of tea in her hands, the steam curling upward in lazy spirals. There was a softness in her posture tonight, a quiet openness that felt rare and unspoken, as if she were allowing me closer not just in space, but in spirit. We talked less this time. The words were sparse, unnecessary almost, because the tension between us had become tangible, like a thread connecting our awareness of one another. I noticed every detail, the slight curve of her lips as she sipped her tea, the way her hair caught the lamplight, the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. My own heart beat faster, in sync with the awareness of her proximity, and I realized how fully I was attuned to her presence. A quiet, unplanned gesture shifted everything. She reached out to adjust the blanket draped over my shoulders. Our hands met again, fingers brushing lightly. This time, neither of us pulled away immediately. The warmth of her touch lingered, spreading through me in a way that was both comforting and electric. Our eyes met, and in that brief, suspended moment, I saw something unspoken in her gaze: recognition, curiosity, and a quiet vulnerability. I realized she felt the same magnetic tension I did, though she, too, maintained a delicate restraint. We laughed softly at something trivial, a joke, a comment about the movie playing faintly on the TV, and in that laughter, the air between us shifted. It was no longer just awareness or admiration. It had become a quiet acknowledgement of desire, an unspoken understanding that we were both navigating something fragile, powerful, and entirely our own. Her presence felt enveloping, protective, and electrifying all at once. I noticed the faintest tremor in her fingers as she handed me the mug, the subtle hesitation in her movements, The way her gaze lingered a heartbeat longer than necessary. Each small detail amplified the emotional weight of the moment, making me hyper-aware of my own reactions. My quickened breath, the warmth pooling in my chest, the slight tension in my hands as I held the tea. It was a dance of restraint and awareness, a slow-burning connection that neither words nor gestures could fully capture. We sat in that quiet cocoon for what felt like hours, our proximity intimate but safe, our touches deliberate yet fleeting. The emotional climax wasn't a dramatic confession or a passionate embrace. It was the recognition of something deeper, a connection built on trust, subtlety, and mutual awareness. For the first time, I understood the power of closeness without urgency, intimacy without overstepping, and desire tempered by respect. As the night drew on, I felt a profound sense of clarity. I cared for her deeply, in ways I had never anticipated, and I knew she felt it too. And yet, it was not about rushing or forcing anything. It was about honoring the quiet intensity between us, letting the unspoken bond settle and grow naturally. This was the heart of our connection, the emotional peak that would shape everything to come. Morning arrived softly, spilling pale gold light through the curtains and painting the living room in quiet warmth. The house felt calm. The lingering traces of the night's energy folded into the gentle hum of the waking day. I was still seated on the couch, nursing a fresh cup of coffee, when she appeared in the doorway, her hair slightly tousled from sleep but still graceful, her presence steady and unhurried. "Morning," she said, her voice carrying the same warmth as the night before, but with a softer, lighter tone. She carried a small tray with breakfast, and the simple act of her moving through the room felt intimate without intention. When she handed me a cup, our fingers brushed once more, and I realized that the brief contact carried the weight of unspoken understanding and lingering connection. There was no need for words. The small gestures of presence, care, and attention were enough to convey everything. We sat together over breakfast, talking about mundane things, plans for the day, errands, fleeting observations from the morning sun. But underneath the ordinary conversation, there was a quiet acknowledgement of the bond that had formed. The night's tension had transformed into a tender, comfortable closeness. Every glance, every smile, every subtle touch reminded me that our connection was real, meaningful, and respected. When she laughed at something I said, I noticed the faint sparkle in her eyes, the soft warmth radiating from her presence, and the way the corners of her lips curved with genuine affection. I reached out briefly to brush a loose strand of hair from her face, and she allowed it without hesitation, our fingers lingering a heartbeat longer than necessary. It was a small gesture, but one charged with the weight of the night before, the quiet acknowledgement of shared moments, mutual understanding, and tender attraction. As I prepared to leave, she walked me to the door, and the sunlight caught the subtle highlights in her hair, making her appear almost ethereal. "Thank you for staying," she said softly, and there was a warmth in her tone that made me realize how deeply this night had touched us both. She hesitated for just a moment, then lightly rested a hand on my shoulder, a simple, affectionate gesture that conveyed both care and connection. I felt the steady warmth, a reminder of the emotional intimacy that had quietly blossomed between us. Before I stepped out, our eyes met one last time, lingering in a shared, unspoken conversation. It was a look filled with respect, acknowledgement, and gentle desire restrained by understanding. The promise of connection hung between us, tender and enduring, but no words were needed to affirm it. Walking away, I carried with me a sense of fulfillment and quiet joy. The experience had been more than an unusual night. It had been a journey into emotional depth, subtle affection, and slow-burning intimacy. I realized that what mattered most wasn't the thrill of desire, but the beauty of connection, trust, and mutual understanding. And in that morning light, I knew that our bond, forged in quiet gestures and shared presence, would linger long after the day had begun, delicate, powerful, and completely unforgettable.